History Channel, where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. Welcome to our weekend Q&A, part one, where you can ask me anything you'd like about history and social studies, get all of your questions answered by a historian. And for the next hour or so, I will be answering all of your questions regarding history, social studies, and the like. We do this every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then after this, at 7 p.m., we are hopping on over to Instagram, where we will be doing another forever how long, maybe an hour, maybe less, of Friendly Neighborhood History, where I'll be answering all of your questions there as well. So follow us on Instagram, friendly_history1. There you can become a friendly neighborhood historian there. You can become a friendly neighborhood historian here by liking and subscribing. It's as easy as all of that. And again, for the next hour or so, I will be answering all of your questions regarding history and the like. So hopefully I'm coming in clear and you can hear me all right. I'm trying a new microphone today and seeing if it has any benefits or if everything sounds good. Hello, Gayahan, good to see you. Am I coming in clear? Wanting to see if this sounds any better, works any better, any of that stuff. So yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, good. Thank you, Gayahan. So yes, for the next hour, I will be answering everyone's questions regarding history and social studies and everything else. So let's see. We'll see who joins us and what gets going. If you enjoy history and social studies, like the live and subscribe for more. And you can become a member, all of that stuff to help boost us even more. If you want a perk comment or something like that, really would be appreciated. Anything you can do helps the channel grow and succeed and become better and better. So that is what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We deliver history in a friendly, neighborly manner. We are about 80. So if you just subscribe, you can become a friendly neighborhood historian. We're about 8,800 friendly neighborhood historians, almost 8,800 friendly neighborhood historians in. And so you can become one just by subscribing. It's as simple as that. Yeah, we're uploading content here and on TikTok and Instagram and X every day. So a lot of great stuff going on there. Hello, Rodolfo. Good to see you. One of my moderators, Rodolfo, is here. Let's see who else joins us and what questions we'll be able to answer today. Hello, Gavin. Yes, Hulk Hogan passed away. I talked about that yesterday. I do a daily news update so I don't just do history, but I do current events. So I talk about stuff like that. And if somebody really important passes away, I do a quick video on them. So I have one on Hulk Hogan, really coming out of nowhere, big surprise. I think he was just 71. He would have turned 72 this year. The wrestling legend who became a celebrity and an actor and even a political activist, if you can believe it or not. Definitely a sad turn of events, but yep. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Happy Friday to everybody. Thank you for joining us. For the next hour or so, I'll be answering all of your questions regarding history, social studies, and everything else. So please like and subscribe, and you can follow us on our social media handles, which hopefully one of my moderators like Solomon, it's good to see Solomon, will be posting in the chat for you guys. We go an hour here on Fridays, then we hop over to Instagram for another hour where I'll answer any questions you have regarding history and social studies and all of that stuff. So we talk about culture, we talk about geopolitics, past and present, we talk about the past so that we can understand where we are and how we are the way we are, understand the human condition and all of that good stuff, and who doesn't like chocolate, am I right, Larry? Big fan of that. But yes, thank you for asking a question that's not exactly about history, but it's all right. Yeah. So if anyone has a question, please drop it in the chat. If you like the vibes, consider liking and subscribing. And I'm trying out a new mic, so hopefully I sound good. Let me know if I'm not coming in clear or if you're having trouble hearing me or something like that. But yeah, if you get your topic, if you have a topic or a question about history or social studies, please just drop it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer it. So hopefully everyone had a good week. What even is the squabble between Cambodia and Thailand? I know they have disagreements on ancient temples on the border, but they do have seemingly hate each other. And yes, of course, I like sweets. Thank you, Larry. Okay, so obviously this is a border dispute, and like almost everything that happens in our world today, there's a lot of history informing it, but basically you have three countries meeting here, and what's called that little circle here is the Emerald Triangle. It's a very heavily forested, heavily green area full of verdure and everything else. And there you have Thailand, you have Cambodia, and you have Laos. And so the three countries come together at this point, and obviously there's a lot of questions about which area belongs to who and how that exactly works. So for a lot of people, the border dispute has been long going between Thailand and Cambodia. Thailand and Cambodia have a very similar history. They have both been kingdoms. They have both been extremely important Southeastern Asian entities. Obviously, Cambodia took a shift in the 1970s by embracing communism. And, you have the Khmer Rouge and all that, as I move to get that glare away. So and the glare got worse. That sucks. So you have that, but you also have Thailand didn't really go in that direction. Cambodia's communist revolution kind of got out of hand. You have the killing fields. So you've got a lot of upheaval in this area of the world over the last 50 years. And it's led to border disputes, which is a cause for many major wars, especially in modern days. I mean, the India-Pakistan war that we had earlier this year for a little bit was caused because of a border dispute in the disputed region of Kashmir. This is caused because of a border dispute right in that Emerald Triangle. Cambodia just asked for a ceasefire. They've lost about 100 soldiers. It really doesn't seem to be escalating, but the Thai government did issue a state of emergency. I talk about it and a bunch of other stuff on my daily news updates. And so I made a couple of videos yesterday explaining why this Thai-Cambodian disconnect is happening. So, is Palestine free or no? What do you mean by that? Ivan, what do you want to know about the Balkans, the area of southeastern Europe that was controlled by the Ottomans and gained its independence in the late 19th and early 20th century, then fell under different regimes, different communist regimes during the Cold War. Texas, good to see you. Solomon, good to see you. Larry, good to see you. I don't know what you're trying to ask me, Larry. You're going to have to rephrase your question. But yeah, so basically, that's how the whole issue of Cambodia and Thailand work. Do you think the situation in Venezuela is as dire as they say? People probably exaggerate certain things. It's like when you see these war-torn areas or these absolute slums and ghettos and horrible neighborhoods in different areas of different states or countries, and then you actually look at the entire scope of it, and there's really nice areas, there's really nice neighborhoods. The idea that Iran, for instance, or any area in the Middle East is just a massive deserty area that's full of ancient ruins and destroyed buildings because of the wars there, with people running and starving and all of that, isn't always true. There's plenty of areas in these countries that are actually quite nice and enjoyable and beautiful, and I'm sure it's the case in Venezuela as well. So it's probably not as bad as we think, and there's probably lots of livable and enjoyable areas in Venezuela, but that doesn't mean that things are not going great. Hello, Amar. Hello, Nugs. Hi, I'm good to see you. As a historian, do you feel you can definitely call North Korea bad, or do we need to apply cultural relativism and just say it's different than how South Korea turned out? As a historian, I don't like to make a lot of moral judgments. I like to look at practical results and what that implies. So I, of course, can go back and say the Holocaust, Mao's famines, the Holodomor, things like this were obviously bad things that caused the deaths of untold millions of people. That was really, really terrible. And I can say the same, and I can look at the results of governments that were established. We were just talking about Cambodia, the killing fields, the Khmer Rouge, how Pol Pot massacred almost a third of the population. I can go back and say and apply that to North Korea and say, yeah, their society really has had some huge failures. Their governmental system has really failed a lot of their people, and there's a huge divide between how North Korea's ran and how South Korea's ran. So, what's up, El Capo? Good to see you. When is Israel going to free Palestine? The whole issue there is, who do they free Palestine to? Obviously, very few people, even in the Arab world, want Hamas controlling Gaza and a large constituency of Palestinian people. The Palestinians are not free anywhere they go in the Middle East. They're certainly not free in Israel. They're not free in Lebanon. They're not free in Jordan. They don't have civilian rights. They cannot just leave and go to those countries. There's huge worries and questions about their intentions in areas like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And of course, there's also Israel breathing down their neck and the consistent fighting in Gaza, which has led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people, a mass humanitarian crisis, mass starvation is now being warned about. The truth of the matter is, when they're going, it's probably, I think that a lot of Israelis, at least in the middle, who are not extremists, who just want to steal land and who are not just against Israel no matter what, a lot of Israelis think that if the Palestinians can replace their governments with less corrupt, more open, more peaceable organizations like the PLO has become, which is the historic Palestinian Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat, which got a lot farther in trying to give freedom to the Palestinian people than any other organization, Hamas or the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. If that can happen, then those areas, then they're going to let them go and have their own country. So yes, they do need to free Palestine, but you also have to free Palestine from different political oppressive entities, just like the Soviet Union, for instance. So yes, when will Israel free Palestine? When will Hamas free Palestine? When will the Palestinian Authority free Palestine? And when will Israel free itself of Netanyahu? These are all big questions right now in the geopolitical scheme. Does a socialist government lead to communism? Why do so many American Democrats want socialism? Help me understand, please. Socialism it's weird because communism was started by Karl Marx, although it had some predated ideas to that. But the modern form of communism was definitely a Marxian principle, but was almost purely an economic application of dialectic materialism. Now, I know that's a bunch of big, funny words, but basically it's the idea that you have different dialect, to speech. You have a tension, a conflict going on between different classes of people. Originally, it was landowners and people who don't own land. It's workers and business owners. It's the rich and the poor. That was really applied to social classes by Mao and has been applied in cultural Marxist theory to different struggles. That any struggle between different groups of people with different histories and values, where there has been a history of oppression, can be interpreted to be this group versus that group. So blacks versus whites in the United States because of the legacy and history of slavery, for instance. So communism has become a far more cultural tool, Texas, than it was before. Socialism has become more economic, where it was originally a cultural idea. So they've kind of flipped. Socialism doesn't always lead to communism. Socialism has economic parts to it. Communism tends to have a more strict authoritarian government in there that will usually lead to some sort of unilateral dictatorship. That isn't always the case in socialism, but it does happen sometimes. And I'm not going to say that American Democrats necessarily want socialism. Reigning in capitalism, advocating for certain social benefits, advocating for higher taxes on the rich is not necessarily socialism. Let me see here. The Prince of Darkness implies a King of Darkness. Well, that was in reference to Ozzy Osbourne, who also passed away. Who is more evil, Netanyahu or Ivor the Boneless? Rajan, interesting one. Well, by the amount of people killed, probably Netanyahu. But Ivar the Boneless, a fascinating reference, was a famous Viking who invaded Northumbria and England, northern England and central England during I think the late 9th, early 10th century. Some people believed he was boneless because he had a lack of cartilage, so he was disabled. Nobody knows exactly why he was called that, but he did some horrific things, including practicing the spread eagle, where people would literally cut someone open, take the lungs out of the ribs, and expose them in an eagle-like form. So they were pretty brutal. I would say that Netanyahu is not as brutal, although some of the stories are pretty horrific to hear about, but obviously you had smaller populations. What happened in okay, good evening, White Widow, good to see you. So if you put Korea and China, will they do a war or live together? I don't know. Korea has always been kind of in this liminal position between Japan and China, and has played off of both of them and their political ambitions, fighting against both of them on several different occasions. So it's not a clear one-for-one thing, Larry. I don't expect North Korea to ever give up its sovereignty to China, or South Korea to do that for Japan. Let me test your knowledge. What happened in 1415? 1415, you got Jan Hus killed by the Holy Roman Emperor after he was promised safe travel. He was one of the early proto-reformers. 1453, a lot happened, most notably the sacking of Constantinople and the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, by the Ottomans. And 1485 is the end of the War of the Roses, the Battle of Bosworth Field, where King Richard III is killed and his crown is literally placed on the head of an insurgent, Henry VII, Henry Tudor, who will marry the daughter of the last Yorkist king to unite the Yorkist and Lancastrian sides and form the new House of Tudor. So I glanced through the chat, and you've talked about Palestine. I want to ask a question. Apologies if you've already answered it already. Go ahead, Mr. Monair. It's good to see you, by the way. And I'm talking about that because people were asking about that. Typically, we talk about all types of history, social sciences, and things. So why did communism spread so rapidly in Asia? I'm answering. I'll get to your question in a second, Mr. Monier. So Asia tended to have more susceptibility to communist revolution because, like in Russia, ironically, despite the fact that Marx believed that communism could only work if an industrialized proletariat overthrew its business owners, societies that industrialized in Europe, for instance, and the United States tended to gain more rights through collective bargaining, trade unions, regulations of the market, but also give and takes between owners and employees. Nationalism patriotism and capitalism all seem to be more popular for industrialized societies than it did for non-industrialized societies. So communist revolutions never took off the way Marx wanted them to, be it the Paris Commune of 1871, the Spartacist Revolution in the 1920s in Germany. It never really got as far as he would have liked it to. Non-industrialized societies, Russia was kind of a middling industrialized society. China was a backward society. Cambodia, backwards in the sense that it was more agricultural. Cambodia, same thing. Were more susceptible to believing in class conflict between the rich landowners, business people, and imperialist invaders than were the Europeans. So imperialized countries in Asia and in Africa were more susceptible to socialism and communism because of that. How can you honestly call Hamas a T group but not the IDF? I've never said that I never said that the IDF is not a terrorist group necessarily. The IDF is a fighting force, and they are not committed, at least not ostensibly, to the entire destruction of an entire group of people. They may be, and they've shown total recklessness, war crimes, all of that stuff. But that's not equating to the same as wanting to destroy an entire group of people and get in anybody's way to destroy them. And Hamas will do that at any point or time. So I'm not saying that there's anything good about the IDF. I'm not saying that there's no rights for the Palestinians. I'm saying that Hamas is like demonstrably, existentially committed to destruction of an entire people group, which means genocide. Yeah. You are very knowledgeable, but you forgot to mention Agincourt. Oh, you were thinking of the 100 Years' War? Yes, the Battle of Agincourt, Henry V's greatest victory. I forgot that one. Is someone interested in Russian history? Can you give a brief introduction into Marx, Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and Stalin? Why did the idea of authoritarian leftism sweep over Russia? We do live stream lectures every Sunday at 4 Eastern, and I'm thinking that might be the topic this Sunday. I'm going to put a poll up, but that's definitely one of the ones people will be voting on. It would take me a long time to describe it, but basically Bolshevism is a Russian interpretation, a hardcore Russian interpretation of Marx's doctrines. There were other groups that encouraged Marxist doctrine, like the Mensheviks and the Socialist Revolutionaries, and the Bolsheviks basically defrocked them, stole power from them, and then refused to let them participate in the government. The only reason Trotsky got anywhere was because he basically switched his allegiances before it was too late. He would have been shut out of the government if he had remained a Menshevik. Something people don't know about. To assume that that Russia was ready for communism makes no sense whatsoever, even from a Marxist point of view. Then to assume that all the Marxists in Russia were Bolsheviks is also nonsensical, because the vast majority of even communists in Russia were not Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks shot the arrow, then drew the target around it, and you either complied or you were disenfranchised. And it was authoritarian in the sense that because you have such a small minority of people rising to power in a basic coup of the preliminary government, the Bolsheviks had to do everything in their power to hold on to what they had taken for the next 5 years. So that meant making huge concessions to the Germans so the Germans wouldn't keep fighting the war. It involved killing people. It involved the Civil War. It involved terrorizing people to fight for you, which is what Trotsky did as the leader of the Red Army. It involved shutting out and killing the revolutionaries. It involved stealing wealth from the church, which was one of the richest institutions. And it involved persecution of anyone who resisted you. And that's why you had the Red Scare, or not the Red Scare, the Red Terror it's called. The Red Scare was in the United States against communism. And then you have Lenin basically killing anyone who got in his way. And so out of the ashes emerges the Soviet Union, which is authoritarian, because authoritarianism was the only way the Bolsheviks stayed in power. Why is nearly every major Western and some Eastern leader involved or semi-involved with Freemasons and or Illuminati? Not only leaders, but groups like MI6. I don't know if that's fully true, Mr. Monor, but I would say that there are a lot of people involved in different organizations where they can have talks and make agreements about money, power, influence, and the future, as well as the past history. And they don't want it to be known, but they had these talks and they had these secret agreements. Do you believe the two princes in the tower were killed by Richard Plantagenet or by Henry Tudor? I think Richard killed them. I think that the Occam's razor tells us Richard put them under his care, put them in the tower for their safety, and then they end up dead. And he ends up king. For sure, but the pressure cooker will explode, and all the pressure is just constantly applied to it. Hamas Palestine is the pressure cooker, by the way. Interesting. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. What was the deal when there were 2 or 3 men all claiming to be popes? The word Avignon seems to stick in my memory. There was a pope in Rome and a pope in Avignon, and I always forget it, there was, originally I think a pope had been captured by the French king and held there, and eventually, it's called the Babylonian captivity of a church, and that eventually led to the Avignon papacy, where you had two popes claiming to be the correct pope and condemning the other as a heretic for almost 100 years. And then eventually they finally settled on one pope, I think at the Council of Florence, 15th century, something like that. It was during the 13 and 1400s. I'm not a huge expert in it, but it's interesting stuff. You basically have a corrupt Catholic system that is struggling to keep the reins on the political machinations going on throughout Europe. The papacy is not as strong as it was in the 11 or 1200s, and so you have competing factions. You have the French being one of the biggest powers of papal authority, one of the biggest Catholic powers in Europe, doing what they can to influence and control the papacy. And so if you look at the medieval era, it's not just the Catholic Church controlling everything and making secular powers do what they want and kill people and do all of this crazy stuff. There's actually a lot of tension between the sacred and the secular. The separation of church and state comes about as a response to what people misinterpret as the church and the state working together. But the church and the state were often at odds. The Catholic Pope continued to try to control the Holy Roman Emperor, and this really didn't go the way he wanted it to. Eventually, it decentralized the power of the Holy Roman Empire, which rendered him useless in that. The French kings were always thwarting. You have the English doing their thing with Henry VIII later on. But centralized Catholic authority, where the Pope said do this, and his bishops said do this, and the kings would listen, really is a myth. Yeah. Tsar Nicholas II needed to either abdicate or be dethroned. He was simply not delivering peace, bread, and land, and so Lenin had to do what he did. Lenin did not deliver those things either. It was, at least not to the millions of people who died. It's one of those things where they weren't rescued, they were under new management. Yes. Yeah, it's true. This didn't start on October 7th, Mr. Monor, but that doesn't excuse. It's not like, I really do not like this. They did some things wrong. No, they perpetrated an invasion, and that doesn't excuse that. I'm not saying Israel's done some things wrong. Israel's done some horrible things. It's really, both sides have just proven to be awful in many, many regards. Do you have any knowledge about the Sao Paulo Forum? No, Nicholas, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know a huge amount about Brazil. Why was Karl Donitz spared in the Nuremberg trials? I'm not sure. I don't know who he is. The influence of the Freikorps in Germany after World War I. Can you elaborate? I would call it World War II. If I am correct, the Freikorps were a German military group that basically helped the Weimar Republic establish control. They were made up of military officers from the last war who did everything in their power to help Weimar control different uprisings like the communist Spartacist revolts in 1920. No, Raja, that's a myth. The White Army did not want the Tsar in power. Some of them might have, but Kolchak and I forget the name of the other major commanders, these men wanted a liberal democracy, or at least a constituent assembly like Kerensky had before that. They were not just trying to put the monarch back into absolute power. Some of them may have wanted a constitutional monarchy like you had in Great Britain, but they were not in love. They wanted to rescue the Tsar because of his patriotic and political importance. They were not sympathetic to the idea of a perpetual monarchy. And killing the Tsar was obviously awful. Communism as an idea is always very nice, but unfortunately we're not there yet and probably never will be. Socialist democracy may be the next best thing. We'll see, Tanuki. We'll see if we'll get there. Another question. If you believe yourself to be an objective historian, tell me in short, what do you think about Bohemian Grove, 9/11, the so-called war on terror, and the Iraq of Afghanistan? I love this. The idea that I'm not an objective historian unless I believe unsubstantiated theories that nobody is sure whether or not they are true. I am open to all sorts of theories and ideas being true, as a matter of fact, but that doesn't mean that I believe in them or think that they're efficaciously true. And that doesn't mean there's evidence for them. Obviously, the Bohemian Grove is one of several different organizations like the Freemasons, Illuminati, and Bilderbergers, who have gotten a lot of attention for being a cabal of private individuals who are extremely rich, wealthy, or powerful, or all three. And wealth and riches, I don't mean in the same way, who have the ability to manipulate and control the world around them. There may be some truth to that, but that doesn't mean they caused 9/11. That doesn't mean they caused the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were caused as an overreaction to the attack on the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and Flight 93 on September 11, 2001. The U.S. basically used that as an excuse to overthrow Saddam Hussein and try to promote democracy in Iraq, and also to do the same in Afghanistan, although the Afghans were definitely responsible for, the Taliban was responsible for sheltering al-Qaeda, which the U.S. learned the hard way in a 20-year war that went nothing. Obviously, the lens of history and hindsight, at least for now, gives us the impression that these things were both disastrous mistakes perpetuated by false ideas and deceptive notions. The false ideas being you can bring good democracy anywhere because it works so well in the West, it'll work in Afghanistan and Iraq. The false evidence obviously being this idea that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that the Taliban and that the Afghans, that Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan and he'll be easy to find. Neither of those turned out to be true. If I'm correct, the American Legion was a paramilitary organization that did everything in its power to basically root out whoever they felt was an anarchist or communist. Also, is the Uyghur genocide real or not? I see lots of good proof for good sides as exaggerated and true. I don't know if there's a genocide going on. The Uyghurs are a ethnic and religious minority. Most of them are Muslim. I think almost all of them are Muslim in China, and there are rumors of persecution and perhaps even genocide. I don't know how far the rumors go with that. I think we'll see in the next 10 years. I really do think that most of these current events that people are asking about, we will look back on in 10 years and say, okay, it's obvious to us this is what's happened. Donetsk basically took up the mantle after Hitler and killed him themselves. He was in charge of the Navy, and apparently Nimitz personally vouched that Donetsk was a good man. Maybe he's just thrown into that position at the last moment. I mean, there was only a week left in the war after Hitler took his own life. A friend of mine, also a historian and political scientist like yourself, has done a deep dive on this. I checked out some stuff from people like Dr. Gabor Mate. October 7th seems exaggerated. No. Why did they call them White Russians? The Reds, obviously, communism has always loved the color red. I'm trying to remember why they called it that. I believe they were called whites for purity. I think there was some sort of symbolic connection to it. But basically, the whites favored were a group of more conservative revolutionaries, people who were from the military, and basically people who wanted to overthrow the Bolshevik regime got together. Through a series of pogroms, terrorist activity, and basically authoritarian principles in the areas that they controlled, they isolated a huge number of the population who would rather go with the Bolsheviks, who didn't seem as mean. They never got the support and the wherewithal and the infrastructure of the Red Army, especially after Trotsky took over it, so they were always at a disadvantage, but they actually got close to winning the Russian Civil War, especially with help from the Czechoslovak League and other foreign interventionism from the United States and Great Britain. I disagree with your perspective that King Richard killed his own nephews. Instead, he was power hungry, but I believe they were exiled. Henry VII had more reasons to kill them, and he got rid of Teddy. There's actually been bones found that probably date from that region of young boys, too, for a matter of fact. So I got a very serious question. Let me see. Yeah, very serious question. Hilarious, John. As a Swiss, I always wonder if direct democracy would work in bigger countries. It'd be a lot harder in the United States because you've got so many more people. You've got such a big amount of land. One thing that makes direct democracy work is a smaller amount of land, so it's easier to gather people. It's easier to, the modern technology makes it, but personal assemblies in Athens, it was a lot easier. I don't see direct democracy working in a much bigger place. I should clarify, I don't mean to imply you're not an objective historian, rather I just wanted to detail it. Also, we know the Tudors, to cement their claim to the throne, they engaged in significant propaganda against King Richard. Shakespeare especially was a Tudor agent. No, he wasn't. Shakespeare had a lot of criticisms of the Tudors, both Elizabeth and Henry VIII. He wasn't necessarily a Tudor agent. He obviously was raised in a Tudor context with a Tudor monarchy, but I'm not going to sanction that. Yes, there was a lot of propaganda, and Henry VII did everything he could to hold on to his power. But Henry VII wasn't even in the country when the boys were supposedly in prison, were supposedly killed. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Biscuits, we'll see. I really just think that there's no evidence to substantiate that, so. King Richard I or Henry V? Henry V was not only a great king, he was a good ruler. and well, that's the same thing. He was not only a great general like Richard the Lionheart, he was a good ruler, which Richard wasn't. He just kind of left the country behind, and the ransom that they had to pay for him bankrupted the country, led to heavy taxation and huge problems for his brother John. I love listening to this guy talk. Great channel. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. Very kind of you. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. I really appreciate it. And we have actually caught up to the chat for once. I don't know where Hars and Harry are, but usually we have our social media handles dropped in the chat. Solomon, you can find them on my YouTube page. If you could put them in the chat, I'd really appreciate that. So I have X, I have Instagram, I have TikTok now, where you guys can follow me, and I can actually take care of the TikTok part myself. But yeah, still taking questions and topics. We're halfway through our Q&A, Ask Me Anything about history and social studies that we do every Friday here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel at 6 p.m. Eastern, Saturdays 6 p.m. Eastern, then Sundays we do a live stream LEC where you guys get to bring up a particular topic you would like me to discuss with you. And that, well, that's not quite true. You have to vote in a poll, and I pick the winner to be my topic. So I will be putting out a poll later today, so please go and vote in that for what topic you would like me to discuss this Sunday. Usually it's pre-opposed. Thank you, Eric, for the donation. Really appreciate you, as always you are. So you are very, very kind. There I am, at Friendly History on TikTok. Please join us there. And there's Harsonet. Finally there. Finally, we've got Hars. Hars, can you put the social medias in the chat, please? Does Charlemagne make the short list of good leaders, no pun intended, because of his father, or is he just renowned because he saved face for the Latin Church? I think Charlemagne is one of the greatest conquerors in human history. I mean, he was able to basically conquer all of Germany, all of Czechoslovakia, into Hungary. He was able to go into Spain and basically keep the Muslims at bay there. Charlemagne was an extremely good conqueror. He conquered most of Italy. He gave the papal states to the Pope, and the Pope rewarded him by crowning him the new king of the Romans, or the first Holy Roman Emperor. I'm going to say that Charlemagne is the short list of good leaders. You have the Carolingian Renaissance. You have Aiken. You have all of these excellent scholars. You have new texts and translations. You've got an entire system of monks and learners who learn to read and write and are producing texts, translating ancient texts and things like that. No, I didn't get your email. Oh, Hars, I haven't seen it yet. High school stuff, good to see you. So yes, if anyone has a question about history and social studies, a topic they would like me to discuss, I'd be happy to answer it. If you haven't liked and subscribed and become a Friendly Neighborhood Historian, yes, it's as easy as that, please do so. We've got another 25 minutes or so. And thank you, Hars, for that. I did not see your email, so I'm going to have to look at that. I apologize. But yes, those are the social media handles, Substack, Instagram. You also just saw my TikTok, so yes. Seriously, you sent it yesterday and I haven't read it yet? Oh my God, what will I do now? Wow. In between living my life, working on this channel, and all the other stuff I have to do, yes. The world doesn't stop for your emails. Sorry. Maybe you can help me understand. I find it absurd that Israel, who since its inception has nearly always been cruel and destructive, is seen as an equal victim in this conflict. I don't see them as an equal victim in this conflict. There is such a thing as excessive retribution in a war. That's what makes a war, in Western understanding at least, an unjust war. But yeah, I'm not saying there's equal weights and measures here. I don't understand how anyone can at this point. You've got 50,000 people who have died, at least. I mean, I don't know if you would apply the same standard to Israel being cruel, but you would to other Middle Eastern countries. If you applied it to other Middle Eastern countries, then I'm open to it, to going along with saying Israel has always been cruel. But you're making it like we have proper evidence to suggest that Richard was a cold-blooded murderer. At the end of the day, what arose 600 or so years ago is not clear-cut. History is full of hypotheses. Yes, but the most obvious explanation is the correct one. He stole the throne. He starved them to death. He's the one that put them in the tower. That's where they most likely died. If Arthur survived the plague, he would have been a better, fairer, and more decent king than Henry VIII. I don't know about that. Henry was just such an important king to the development of England. He, of course, had his problems, but you have the Anglican Church, you have the independent Great Britain, the Royal Navy, huge change in the way people understood the court, understood statecraft, understood parliament, all of that because of Henry VIII. I don't know if England would have developed a great navy independent of Europe. and then been able to go all around the world. Something that Great Britain has the luxury of doing all throughout its history is separating itself from the affairs of the continent. As it separates itself from the affairs of the continent, using the Royal Navy allows it to go to other places and inculcate its culture and colonization and stuff like that. So I don't know if you get the 13 colonies if you don't have the creation of the Royal Navy, and you don't have the creation of the Royal Navy without Henry. Okay, 2 emails. I'll go and take a look at them. Thank you, Horace. Was Charles Martel Charlemagne's grandson, or was it Pepin? Charles Martel, the Hammer, who won the famous Battle of Poitiers against the Muslims in 732, was Charlemagne's grandfather. His son Pepin, so in the Frankish kingdom, which is what it was until the rise of the Martel dynasty, the Carolingians they call them. Charles the Hammer was there was a king who ran the Merovingian dynasty. The king had very little power and relied on his mayor of the palace, his major of the palace, his best in the palace. That's where the term mayor comes from, if I'm correct, by the way. But the mayor of the palace was Charles Martel, and he organized all of the French principalities, dukes, nobles, whatever, to organize troops to be able to defeat the Muslims at Tours or Poitiers, and of course he became a hero. His son was the mayor of the palace, and he just decided that this was ridiculous, that there was no need for a ceremonial king who did nothing, and he just overthrew the Merovingians and made himself king, I think in 743, something like that. And Charlemagne was Pepin's son, who probably killed his brother Carloman to seize control, because French kings wouldn't just give the kingdom to their son. They would split it amongst several of their children, of course, all being boys. So Charlemagne would divide his kingdom between 3 different areas. And by the way, that's why France, Germany, and the Low Countries, from Belgium and Netherlands in the north down to Switzerland, are all separate entities to this day, because the French the Frankish, as I should call them, because they weren't really the French at this point, separated their inheritances by different sons. But yes, the French kingdom was created, or at least the beginnings of it, by Pepin, Martel's son, and then Charlemagne was Pepin's son. The Qing dynasty, but I would like to learn more. So the Qing dynasty overthrew I'm trying to remember, who was it? They were the Manchus people from the north. They conquered the Qing and overthrew them in the Ming and overthrew them in 1644 and ruled over China for 2.5 centuries. They continued many of the Ming's policies and ideas. China was known for its good civil bureaucracy, for its huge amounts of trade. They increased the amount of sea trade. They became open to European trade, but by the time the Europeans really started to populate their areas, they had become very China was very primitive technologically and societally compared to the Europeans, and this allowed the British, using opium to basically sate the masses, to be able to manipulate them and basically, after winning a couple of wars against them called the Opium Wars, control the way their society functioned and worked for the next about 70 to 80 years. And then in 1911, the last Qing dynasty, the last Qing emperor, I'm trying to remember his name, was overthrown. Military lordships were set up, and eventually a nationalist government was created that was later overthrown by the communists. So there's a little bit on the Qing dynasty. It's the last Chinese imperial dynasty, 1644 to 1911. Talk about the Great Depression all the time, Nugs. 2 weeks ago for our live stream we had it all about FDR. So if you have questions about that, I'd love to talk about the Great Depression with you. Of course, there are terrorist groups in the Middle East, but it's not like our countries, who did over 1 million casualties to mostly innocents in the Middle East, don't have a play in this. Of course, but that's not, by our countries, you mean the United States. The United States has not caused 1 million casualties. The Iraq War had about 1 million casualties from both sides. That's like saying that the Germans are responsible for Nagasaki in the last World War. That's not a very fair statement. Yeah, Hars, I will look at your email after we're done here and then see what we've got. So yeah, yes, it is true, but I'm not excusing the West. I'm not excusing what the West does. I'm saying if you want to talk about terrorist organizations, a lot of these terrorist organizations, and radical Islam itself has existed long before the West got involved. But The terrorist organizations aren't necessarily, some of them have been created in the vacuum, and some of them have been created indirectly or aided. Look at the Mujahideen and the Al-Qaeda. But the truth of the matter is, it's a disingenuous argument to say that, oh, well, look at what the U.S. and the West has done. Yes, we all know what they've done. I've talked about what they've done, but I'm also saying this doesn't excuse. You've got to, if you're going to talk about Israel and what Israel has done, you've also got to talk and say they're evil and they've done cruel and terrible things. Yes, most of the Middle East is cruel and terrible in many, many ways. Yes. Let me see here. What happened in the following years? 1547, that's Henry VIII's death. It's the rise of Edward VI. 1553, that's the first English Queen Regent, Mary. 1558, she dies and Elizabeth takes over in 1603. Elizabeth dies. You're asking for how the Tudors died, basically. You forgot 1509 when Henry VII died. Have you yourself examined and looked into all the evidence of October 7th? Not only that, but are you aware of how much Israeli lies omits? This isn't to say Hamas doesn't. Yes, I've heard some of this stuff. I don't think it's true. I'm more than willing to learn if it is true, but there's nothing that's been verified. There's nothing that we know to be true necessarily. Of course, I'm willing to learn more about it. Let me see here. Can we agree that the United States has been built by the Founding Fathers as an individualistic Protestant Christian country and not a secular one? The Founding Fathers were not Protestant Christians. Some of them were, most of them, a lot of them were not. I like to speculate which ones are, but we don't know exactly who was and who wasn't. Jefferson and Franklin certainly were not. Adams was a Unitarian. George Washington may have been. But the truth of the matter is the Founding Fathers, many of them were intellectuals influenced by the Enlightenment, so a basic medieval Christianity didn't appeal to them. A basic confessional Christian church didn't appeal to them. But yes, the vast majority of people who were living in the United States at the time were at least ostensibly Protestant Christians. I just find it peculiar when our Western countries do anything, we don't think much of it. But when the Middle East Muslim countries do anything like Hamas, we always use the T word or R word. What? I mean, it's all over the news how many people Israel has killed in Palestine. That double standard may have existed 20 years ago, but certainly after Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't exist now. Yes, I know why the Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda were founded. King James was a Satanist and rewrote the Bible. I would love evidence of that. I don't see any. 88% of Latin America is Christian. They are Catholic, mainly influenced by the Spanish and Portuguese. Where's the red couch at? What red couch? Yeah. I am at my usual setting. Edward died, Mary died. Yes, I said that, Raja. Thank you. Okay. Questions. And by the way, Mr. Moyna, I don't disagree with you. I just don't see any evidence of what you're saying. The youth do not visit churches or care. It's constantly mocked in media like the Olympics. Everyone is secular. Oh, you guys are talking amongst yourselves. So anyways, well, they debate about Christianity being dead. Does anyone have any questions about history, social studies, or the like? I'd be happy to answer them, as we do every time at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel with our live stream Q&As every Friday and Saturday at 6. And then, of course, Sundays we do our live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, they were Protestantly influenced. There's no doubt that Protestant Christianity especially influenced the founding of the United States and many of the people, but the Founding Fathers were not, a lot of them were not Christians. Do you think Oliver Cromwell was a good leader? I think if he had just said he was the new king and established the Cromwellian dynasty, he would be one of the best kings in English history. But his hesitancy to do this after overthrowing Charles I means he was not, really froze a lot into questions. And yeah, it's you, Rando. Good to see you. I find it interesting that young people in the U.S. openly support terrorists. What does that mean? Who are you referring to? And yes, the Epstein-Trump thing is nuts, which is why, seeing that it's becoming a scandal of historic proportions, I will probably be doing a long-form video on it at some point in the near future. I will probably just try to do a straight factual timeline of everything that's happened. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm going to enjoy making it, so that may be coming out next week. We'll see. Let me see. Have you looked into NAMLA? Every year we pay taxes for government that says pedophile organization. Oh, why did I say that? Now I'm going to lose my monetization on this video. The Founding Fathers were Scottish. Some of them were. Not all of them. They were waspy. Anglo-Saxons, white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism was indeed the first major group in the United States. You had Catholics in Maryland, you had a few Jews and Muslims, and you had African slaves, other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Have you looked into NAMLA? Yes, I've heard about it. Yeah, I don't know if the I don't think it's true that the United States pays taxpayer dollars to that. I would love to know if that's true or not. I don't think it is. As Muslims increase in numbers, do you think this will weaken U.S. ties to Israel? It's not that's doing it. It's the sensitivity towards empathy and the cleaning up of war. For a long time in human history, everybody just accepted that war is really nasty and civilians will die. But the effort of countries in the 20th century and onward to basically make sure that civilians don't die, and the fact that civilians are dying in this war in such close quarters between Gaza and Israel, right along this very small strip of land in Gaza, has horrified people to no end. So it's the horrificness. So the fact that the war is easily televised, you can find out as much information about it as you want. The fact that you can constantly see it in the media. The fact that you have such close quarters leading to it being so easy to kill civilians, and the fact that in the last century the Western world has tried to impress upon everyone the idea of not killing civilians in war. Something that they failed themselves to do very much so at Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Dresden. But that is a standard that is tried to be reached. The cleaning up of war, the purification of war has made a lot of people very, very desensitized to violence and combat and the need for it to go on for a while. The Civil War cost 600,000 lives in 4 years. Both world wars in the 20th century went on almost endlessly for year after year after year. And yes, people wanted those wars to end, but people understood that this is what happens in war. Ever since the United States won the last World War and kind of started to restructure the way the West looks at these things with humanitarian efforts, leaflets for bombings and things like that, there's been more and more people have been like, okay, this war has lasted for a month, that's way too long. And of course, ideally, I think we can all agree that any war lasting for any period of time is bad. But that doesn't mean that it's unnecessary necessarily. People have become more and more sensitive to war and more demanding of change immediately. And media has presented it to people more so that they can say it. So that's not a bad or a good thing. It's just something that has happened. For me, it's like, yes, it's good that we want to see suffering and death end sooner, obviously, in all ways, shapes, and forms. But I think back, the historical social scientist part of me says, if we had seen the images of, bombings of Germans by the RAF in 1940, 1941, would we have joined the war and stopped Hitler? That's tough for me to decide. That makes me pull back. What is the context of Henry Ford saying that history was bunk? Basically, I don't know the full context, but it's basically this idea that history, you can really just recreate what it is and reinterpret it in a certain light and context, and everybody's got their own opinions, and it's like staring at the 6 or the 9 on someone's standing at the top looking at a 9, someone's standing at the bottom looking at a 6, and it's subjective. But the truth of the matter is that somebody did come along at some point and draw the 6 or the 9, and if you want to look at that number as a symbol for history, then my job as a historian is to explain what number was actually drawn, and do everything I can to figure that out. And Harry's finally here. Good to see you, Harry. Does America have a moral obligation to recognize the indigenous Native Americans, or is it too bad, so sad, Anglo settled and conquered, and we should move on? The historical record is chock full of people, such as Celts and Germans, moving territories and invading and settling. Again, I've talked about this before. It's the fact that there was such a massive amount of death and destruction to the native culture and peoples, the vast majority of whom were killed off by disease. But people like to smuggle that into the argument that Europeans just cantankerously killed them no matter what, which isn't true. It's sometimes true, unfortunately, and sometimes not true. It's not fully true. Yes, land acknowledgements for a lot of people whiff of insincerity and superficiality, because people are like, well, this doesn't go far enough. And people who want nothing say, well, that's really pointless and stupid. So things like that. So yes, acknowledging the sins of the past is how we learn from them and get better. But what do you do about them? And we can't rectify everything from the past. It's impossible to rectify. It's impossible to put reparations on every single action in human history, because if you do that, you're going to end up with a jumbled mess that's basically an infinite loop that an infinite regress that nobody can fully address. to the Greeks over Persians or the Iranians for Alexander the Great. You can go back forever if you wanted it to, and I think that's really, really pointless. Is Bridget Macron right to take Candace Owens to court over accusations that Bridget is a he, him, his? Oh, goodness gracious. No offense to you, Raja, but I've been wanting to actually mention this on my news updates, but there's far more important things in the world happening, like children dying in Gaza and millions of Sudanese people finally able to come home, and the war in Thailand and the Epstein files that I haven't been able to talk. It's been on my docket to talk about it in my news reports, but I just don't have enough time, and I only do a minute on them, but I still report a lot of news on it. The Candace Owens, Bridget Macron thing is exceedingly less important than most geopolitical issues. But I will say this. I think from what I can understand and dine of it, and I'm trying to be fair to every side here, as a social scientist, someone who studies this, and is someone, the right wing in the West has become obsessed with transgenderism and worried about its implications and worried about biological changes and worried about all of that sort of stuff. Okay, well, you got some of the things you wanted. You got men out of women's sports, you got this and that, whatever you want to call it. But you don't understand that this is just grasping at straws to continue the issue. And I don't think that most people, even on who are conservatives, even people who supported Donald Trump, are going to support Candace Owens in this endeavor. It just seems foolishly stupid. The woman went from being kind of a mainstream, edgy, right-wing, turning point, PragerU commentator to being just this woman who just doesn't believe in natural science, doesn't believe in the moon landing, doesn't believe in a bunch of different things, has not just anti-Israeli views, but anti-Semitic views. Yes, they are different. And she's kind of gone overboard, even from what I understand, most conservatives think. So I don't think they even support her in this idea to basically unmask Brigitte Macron as a man. I think I don't know why the French are even doing this to strike back with a lawsuit, but I think it could be an effective way of defending her on this issue. People don't want to listen to a political podcast talk about if this person's a man or not. I really don't think so. So, majority of founding fathers were definitely Christians. Okay. You can't just say a few outliers if they are majority. Like, Adams wasn't a Christian. Many people don't believe Washington was a Christian. Thomas Paine wasn't a Christian. A lot of them were not Christians. A lot of the big names that we throw around were certainly not religious, or only partially religious. They had an understanding of the importance of the Judeo-Christian ethic in creating a strong Western society, and they used that. And that comes from Protestant ethos, it comes from Protestant worldviews, it comes from Protestant resistance theory, and some of it comes from Catholicism, and some of it comes from ancient Judaism and the Bible. But that doesn't mean that they were, they would be going to Protestant churches consistently, at least in a sense of affirming the confessions of the Christian faith. So anyways, you notice how the Scottish flag doesn't show. The English one does too, but the UK one does. English, interesting. Scottish are better than Northern. Okay, we're all arguing about different English and Scottish people. How different was the Neanderthal from Homo sapiens? I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know. Obviously, they were a little bit more, I think they were bigger, like their body structures were bigger, but they were not as advanced in terms of tactfulness, in the ability of what they could create. And I don't think that they had developed as much speech as the Homo sapiens were capable of. Let me see here. Is Brigitte Macron taking it too far by suing people over accusations that she may be a man? I don't know. I don't know why you would engage it. I think it's just a way to make money and to condemn conspiracy theories. And yes, I'm going to call it a conspiracy theory. That doesn't mean it can't be true. It doesn't mean it's not possibly true. I'm just saying that it's a conspiracy theory. Why did Arabic numerals end up overtaking Roman numerals? Obviously, the Arabic numerals, which I believe are a creation of the Islamic Golden Age from the Baghdad Abbasid Caliphate, I'm trying to remember exactly why. It might have something to do with the Reformation, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment, which obviously had a penchant for rejecting Roman and ancient ways. I think it was easier for them to use Arabic numerals. I don't know why. Is Michelle Obama going to be president one day? No. I don't see Mrs. Obama ever wanting to run for president. And yes, I said Mrs. Obama, so we can put that conspiracy theory to bed too. Okay, so people are arguing about England and Scotland. That's fascinating. Michelle Obama is a massive racist, and America would be better and safer place if she and Barry just self-deported. You mean the former president of the United States and his citizen wife should self-deport? Jeez, Ozzy. Not exactly a history question, but do you think it's the asteroid, if the asteroid hasn't wiped out dinosaurs, could they have evolved and developed a language? All animals have a language. I don't know how much of that the dinosaurs had. I'm not sure. Probably. It, what we know about evolution is that it happens for organisms to be able to develop the need to do something, to develop the ability to defend themselves, to harvest food, to preserve their race. So if if evolutionary science, if it applies to the dinosaurs, which it does to all species, so it does to them, the only reason for them to develop speech and communication would be for protection, safety, and perseverance and survival. So England didn't become Great Britain until the Scots joined their army. They were regularly whipped by the French, and we won Waterloo too, more generals than any other home countries, rando. Yes, which is why Scotland is the dominant entity of the British Isles and why the capital of Great Britain is in Edinburgh. I love Scotland, by the way. I love Scottish history. If there's anywhere I'd like to go and just live rent-free, if I live any place who lives rent-free in my mind, it's the Scottish Highlands. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Yeah. Yes, yeah, Gaia. I go on to Twitter and I go there not to be and I see people arguing about different political and social issues, and I just see people not thinking logically. And if you just think about these things logically, they're not that complex. And I'll get into a debate with someone, and then someone else from the I'll offer opposite perspective will throw something at me, and I get it here too. And it's fun for me. It's good mental gymnastics. It allows me to prepare for this. Thank you so much, Gaihan. You're so kind. Which subrace has historically and consistently been the most violent? What do you mean by a subrace? I would like you to define that. Well, England needed to be independent, and Scotland also needs to go its own path. The Scots are native Celts, while English are predominantly invading Germans, and Celts, and Jutes. And you know that most of the Celtic peoples and Germanic peoples, most of them come from Germany. Most of the different tribes that you're talking about, the Anglo-Saxons, the Jutes, and the Celts, come from Germany and settled in France and then in Britannia. Although it was called Gaul back then. France was called Gaul under the Romans. The Democratic Party will stop at nothing to jail Trump. Oh, jeez. Yes. I talked about Israel-Palestine. I talked about Brigitte Macron, and now everyone wants to talk about Trump and the Obamas. They don't care if their party is destroyed in the process. It's really sad. I don't know. The Epstein stuff doesn't look good for him at all. I mean, and this is coming from someone who, at least from what I can see of logic and reason, doesn't think that he has anything to do with Epstein's wrongdoings, but can also use my head and say, why is he being so dang cagey about something that is so obviously supported by a lot of people, including his own supporters? So yeah. Let me see. Yeah, that's true. It is true, White Widow. The Scottish in Caledonia could never be defeated. It was only one general, Agricola, who was actually able to subdue them. And the Romans would have taken over Scotland had Domitian, the emperor, not brought Agricola back to Rome because he was jealous, probably, of Agricola's rising power. By the way, I've done a short series on the Roman emperors, the Russian czars, the British monarchs. Go check that out for more. I'm doing a current short series on Russian history with a video dropping later tonight. And I've got long-form videos dropping every Monday and Friday. Today I'm dropping a compilation on the Plantagenets. So if you want to learn more about the English and Scottish feud, which you guys are talking about in the chat, you can watch my compilation video of my shorts there. That comes out. That's all on YouTube. So yeah, exclusively on YouTube, I believe. Hey man, your opinion on Chechnya wanting to separate itself from Russia? Ukraine declared Chechnya as temporarily occupied by Russia. Nothing is ever temporarily occupied. At least, well, sometimes it is, but not with Russia, not with Putin, not with right now. I don't know a huge amount about the Chechnyan uprising, but I just know that Putin is an acquisitive force. He did this with Chechnya, then it was Georgia, then it was Crimea, now it's segments of Ukraine, and you think he will stop if he just gets everything he wants. He will not stop without some sort of compromise or a strong show of force. And people like Putin don't stop. Now, Putin, I think Russia is far more paper tiger than Germany was, so I don't think this is a Neville Chamberlain Munich moment where Chamberlain basically just gave Hitler everything he wanted and felt that they had made peace in their time. I don't think that, and then Hitler took all of Czechoslovakia instead of half of it like they agreed. I think that Putin is far more susceptible to an overthrow, far weaker than the Nazis were. I think the Russians are doing this just so that Putin can stay in power. And I think if he loses this war, he loses power. You say Judeo-Christian. Did the Founding Fathers care about the Jews? Was commonality of Jewish and Christian philosophy strong during the 18th century? It's a great question. Somewhat. there was a lot of anti-Semitism amongst Christians, but many of the Enlightenment thinkers, and certainly founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson among them, believed that these original principles do not originate from from the New Testament and Christian scriptures alone, but from the Hebrew Bible, from the Ten Commandments, from the Torah, from things like that, and that this existed with the Jews and still existed with the Jews. So I don't know, maybe it's anachronistic, but it is accurate. Do you think the UK would benefit from a second elected House of Parliament? Yes. Ask Montesquieu and Madison. Hey, friend. Hey, Stryker. Good to see you. Nice to see you as always. I didn't know you were a liberal. I don't tell people what I am. I don't. I don't. I love this. If I agree with you, I must be one of the good guys. If I disagree with you about anything, I must be one of the bad guys. I don't. You have no idea what I am. I am constantly pushing back on Harry attacking conservatives, and I'm constantly pushing back on maybe you attacking liberals. People don't know what I am because I'm a social scientist, I'm a historian, I'm looking at this from a very different lens than all of you are, and it's not that I'm better, it's just that I'm different. And so, yeah, we are getting somewhere, but they're, okay, Brando and everyone's arguing. Go ahead, as long as you keep it friendly. Judeo-Christian is an absurd term, since Judaism, Jews think Jesus is in hellfire, and Christianity is an idolatry religion. That is true, but there are some Jews who certainly still believe that. But that is not what Judeo-Christian means. Judeo-Christian is a reference to the fact that the Christian traditions, many of the Christian doctrines and theologies and ethics and even the political structures come from the Bible, which is Old and New Testament, which obviously the Old Testament was given to the Jews first. This is what the New Testament itself says, so that was then later applied to Christians. So it's not just, so it's Judeo-Christian in the sense that it permeates two of the three Abrahamic religions, and it was originally created and given to the Jews, and then the Christians added to it with the New Testament. So, no squirt guns, Mr. Manar. You do still learn Roman numerals in school, but I have never added XXI with XXXXIII. Figure that out. I think the answer is 54. Let me see here. Everyone's talking. I'm trying to catch up with the chat. If you haven't had your question answered, be patient. I will be there. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please be sure to do so. Hey, I never said or insinuated Michelle Obama's gender, but you assuming that something else implies that it's a very contentious discussion point. It is. There are a lot of right-wingers, and Guy Hahn can attest to this because I'm on the internet, I'm on social media now trying to grow the brand, but I see a lot of people advocating all sorts of crazy ideas and conspiracy. I shouldn't even say crazy ideas, conspiracy theories. And for me, what makes a conspiracy, as a historian who studies conspiracy theories and actually gives wind to them, if you have a conspiracy theory, I will accept it and listen to it. I may not agree with it, I may think it's bunk, but you have a right to express it, and I think it should be heard. I used to think the Kennedy assassination was a conspiracy theory. Now I generally believe I don't have a clue, as I was trying to go somewhere with figs, it wasn't working, but I don't have a clue who killed Kennedy. I don't think it was Oswald, but I don't know. And I'm a historian, and I can say that, and people will not like that because official narratives die hard, but that doesn't mean that, official narratives, people used to believe that left-handed people were diseased. I'm left-handed, and I may be diseased, but it's not because I'm left-handed. So the truth of the matter is there's all sorts of conspiracy theories, and I think that conspiracy theories generally tend to have very little compelling evidence and are generally brought about with bad faith arguments. I don't think that applies to the Kennedy thing. I do think that applies to the Michelle Obama thing. And if you want to hear one on the left, so that I'm sounding fair and balanced, the Trump didn't get his ear shot is another ridiculous conspiracy theory. There you go. And they have circumstantial evidence and they have insinuations. So yeah, there you go. The first numbers, okay, let me see here. Let me see. T-Love, what can you tell us about the Thailand-Cambodia conflict? I've read that France played a part in giving Cambodia a favorable border. I spent time in Thailand, that's why I asked. So this is interesting because I talked about it a little bit. I talked about it at the beginning, T-Love, and obviously I want to go to Thailand so bad because I love their culture. But Thailand is one of the few countries in the world that was never colonized by any of the Europeans or even the Middle Easterners. It was never conquered by the Mongols. It was never conquered by the Mughal. Nobody ever was able to conquer it. The Japanese went through it to get to the British colonies in East India, in the East Indies during World War III, or what you may call World War II in the 1940s. But Thailand has never been colonized. Cambodia was colonized as part of French Indochina, then had a communist revolution. The Thai government never embraced a communist revolution. Thailand has had a long-standing kingdom, although it's more of a constitutional and ceremonial monarchy now. But there's very much a very different spirit in Thailand than there is in Cambodia. There's been a cultural shift over the last 50 to 60 years that makes them very, very different entities. So Tila, the truth of the matter is there's a little area called the Emerald Triangle. It's called the Emerald Triangle because of all the verdure around it, and it is where 3 countries have a border. It is Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. And I've talked about this in my daily news segments and in a couple other videos, but basically Cambodia supposedly was setting mines all over the border. A Thai soldier stepped on one and was horribly injured. Thailand responded by attacking Cambodia, and Cambodia moved tanks and missiles to the border to attack them. Cambodia has lost 100 soldiers and is now asking for a ceasefire. That's the last I know of it before I went on this. But yeah, France played a part in colonizing and giving a favorable border to the Cambodians. But I'm not going to take a necessary side because I just don't know enough about this. But I do know why it's happening. So there you go. Can you prove how Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, and Roger Sherman aren't clearly Christians? Yes, some of the founding fathers were Christians. You know your stuff, mate. You like a human encyclopedia. You are so kind. I really appreciate that. I'm going to put that as our pinned comment because that is so kind of you. Thank you. I love the scene in Transporters where Ewan McGregor is lamenting the fact that Scotland was so lazy that it got conquered by English wankers. Yeah. Yeah. Ewan McGregor is a great actor. In the context of football, will England ever win a trophy in our lifetime? You mean soccer? The English always kind of do well, but no. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm wrong about Jimmy Spice. And sorry if I haven't answered anyone's questions. I'm trying to. I'm catching up slowly but surely. We're going overtime so I can answer as much of this as I possibly can. What are the chances of one living organism naturally coming into existence in 10 billion years? Okay, Luis, I understand what you're going with that. Yes, there are a lot of questions with the theory, not the law or rule, but the theory of macroevolution in particular. We know I'm not talking about that happening over. I'm talking about microevolution, the fact that species do change and adapt based on their circumstances and scenes, which I think is far more provable than what happened 10 billion years ago. And yes, it does depend on the environment. Let me see here. What about, do you think the UK would benefit from a written constitution? The UK does have a written constitution. Putin is not Hitler. Putin is wise, but his age is kicking in. It's obvious you are a centrist liberal. Thanks, Raja. I don't know what a centrist liberal is. I don't know what a centrist liberal is. I don't know if you can pin that on me. I don't discuss people don't know my religious beliefs. They don't know my political beliefs. They don't know my name, my age, and most of you, actually, basically all of you, don't know my location. It's okay. I'm Friendly Neighborhood History. This is my channel. And if you like and subscribe, you're a friendly neighborhood historian, as I know you are, Raja. But yes, your room doesn't look like American, though. It seems heavily influenced from other cultures. The social scientist likes a room with heavily influenced. There's a lot of Rococo elements, so French maybe, but not too diverse. I wish it was more diverse. And whatever money we raise from the channel goes into building the studio up, into decorating it, into getting us better equipment. I'm using a microphone today, so things might be a little different. So yeah, but thank you. I take that as a compliment, Sam. If Russia falls in Ukraine, it will lose the North Caucasus. A lot of internal problems in Russia, which the West is not informed about. It's true. Of all the religious scriptures, which do you think is the most historically preserved? The Vedas, the OT, the Gospels, the Quran? Ooh, great question. Ooh, this is a tough one. Because the Vedas are clearly the oldest, the Hindu text written about the 15th century BC. The Hebrew scriptures are written anywhere between the 14th, 15th century BC and all the way till the 6th century BC is when they're really compiled, the Torah especially. The New Testament is written within the generation of Jesus' life, but it really isn't compiled into a full book until the 4th century. The Quran, some of you might know this because you've seen my videos about it. The Quran is written in the 7th century. I mean, people say Muhammad wrote it. I don't know if that's true. But it's written in the 7th century. Some of the earliest carbon dating we have of some of the scripts of the manuscripts come from the early and mid 7th century, the Birmingham, the Samarkand, Kufic. It's similar in the sense that you've got really a lot of the writings and legends around the earliest Islamic writings come from centuries later that say, yeah, this was written back then. So we don't really know. both the Quran and the New Testament, I would lean towards because they have attestation within the sense of a scientific attestation of being written in that century following their leaders, Muhammad and Jesus. So there you go. Thank you, M. Yes, I'm a kosher Nazi. I don't know what that means. Oops. What did I do? Oh, I turned off my camera. Sorry. I've never done that before. Friendly history is definitely partly progressive. How much? I'm not sure. Just based on what I've heard from him in history and modern day. I stay in a port a royal burr called Leaf. Interesting. You guys killed James I? How dare you? Will Gaza be ethnically cleansed? Is Hamas even real? Hamas is real. I really hope it doesn't get ethnically cleansed. It already has been in some ways. If I know 4 languages, including my native one, am I a polyglot? Yes. In Russia, you have, besides Chechnya, Tartars, Dagestan, Bashkortostan, which is also what wants to separate itself. Yeah, the Russians don't want areas gaining autonomy. When you have such a huge country, that happens. And it's got cultural, ethnic, and historical ties that bind it to it, but it's also got its own distinct culture. Name a modern city, great historical significance? Mecca, there you go. Or you mean a city built in the last few centuries? New York. Why I find it an absurd term is because Judaism recognizes Islam as a legit religion and Muhammad as a Gentile's prophet, but strongly opposes Christianity. Judeo-Islamic should be the term. Ooh, look at what's happening right now. I don't know if Islamism exists at all. And Islam and I don't see Judaism really getting on board with Islam at all. Where does the buck stop with Epstein? Geez. The buck always stops with the president, so there you go. Here's my conspiracy theory, Henry. The ape is the reason for Brexit. Yes. My reason is that he's the foundation of Britain hating Europe. No, they hated Europe before then. It was just mainly the French. The British just like to go back and forth between where they want, if they want to be European or not, and that's what Brexit is. Be careful, friendly history. Don't talk about Kennedy, or else the CIA will come after you like they did Nixon. Yes, I've heard Tucker Carlson explain that, and it's interesting. Yeah. I know you think Nixon didn't really do anything wrong, but or maybe you don't. Maybe you think that he only did slightly small things wrong, but yeah, Nixon deserved to lose power. Doesn't Trump need to be sitting in prison? If he got sentenced to prison, the judge who convicted him never really gave him a sentence. Yeah, a lot of people think Kennedy was killed by the CIA to ramp up the war in Vietnam. I've talked about the Kennedy assassination and the different theories around it. I should probably just do a live stream lecture on John F. Kennedy, and I can explain. And the first half will be all about Kennedy's life and his background and everything that made him president. And then the second half will be all about, Kennedy and how he died. Russia is losing its influence in the Caucasus. Thank you, Ichikeria Warrior, because Azerbaijan and Armenia found common ground. Yes, I've heard that. And their war ending is bad news for the Russians because both of them really, really are upset with them. So Russia's getting kind of surrounded. But yes, thank you, Warrior Tribe, for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it. Well, it's not minds. Well, it is minds, but we're not thinking alike. Fools seldom differ, Harry. Rambam, Judaism's biggest scholar, says Jews can pray in a mosque but not a church. I've heard people say that before, and it's absurdity because I've seen Jews go. Yes, there's a lot of that, but you also have to understand that's a historical argument more than it is actually a religious argument. They believe Jesus to be an idol. I'm aware of that. Why Europeans, especially British colonized countries? Is it to educate people and make them civilized modern? No, the opposite. Well, actually, it's weird because the British and the French and the Germans did that and did colonize and civilize and bring their civilization with technology and infrastructure to those areas. The trade-off was obviously to extract and exploit resources and use the people as cheap labor. Well, 1 second, you're not allowed to criticize the Thailand monarchy. If you do, you can get up to 25 years in prison. Yes, but it's not. Yeah, they have some pretty strong loyalties to their monarchy. I have a question. What do you think about Putin saying whenever an American president is elected, some people take him to a room, sit him down, and tell him how things are really going to work out? Maybe. I'm not extremely opposed to it. I don't see any evidence of this. I don't know if I like the source. I try not to poison the well when I say, it's just this person reporting it. It's, I see this all the time, every day in our society. Fox News said that, so who cares? This is Russian misinformation. CNN said that. Why should I care what the fake news left-wing media says? Is it true? Is it verifiable? Do multiple sources corroborate it? Are you hearing it from multiple sources? Do people admit it? Then it's true. It doesn't matter who it comes from. So I don't know. I don't know if it's. I don't know how it can be true for the United States, but not for Mr. Putin himself, with all of the oligarchs, the Russian mafia, and the exorbitant amount of influence of the dying Russian Orthodox Church. Because yes, the Russian Orthodox Church is dying, and they're basically revered as gods in their opinion. Yep, that's true. Would it be nice if we say XYZ country colonized these countries because these times it was not a country with political boundaries, it was simply a piece of land? Yeah, it's more difficult because you have the Native Americans, a lot of them did not have, in the Northeast at least, did not have a semblance of property and borders and land and had more of communal attitudes towards it. So the Europeans moving in and taking it really didn't fit with that. Whereas in Africa, you had defined kingdoms and stuff, but the Europeans just drew the boundaries so they could take their land. The ICJ ruled 3 times in favor of Cambodia. Interesting. I don't know. I've heard different sides to this. I don't know. And I don't know if I always trust the ICJ anyways. Make sure Ronald Reagan, please, is a vote topic for Sunday. Well, me being a centrist leftist, whatever that is, obviously doesn't want to talk about Ronald Reagan. St. Louis, hello. Good to see you. Yes, soccer and football are the same. Nancy Pelosi is a centrist Democrat. Okay. What's your opinion on neoliberalism? Is it bad or good? Good or bad? It's not working. I don't know how good. It's like neoconservatism. It's basically this idea that by acting with a good example and a good mind, we can change the hearts. By acting on good faith and giving people trust, we can intervene in other countries, and through doing what we believe to be the right things from our perspectives, change the way those countries think and bring them to the table. It isn't working. It doesn't work. It didn't work in Iran. It didn't work in much of the Middle East. Yeah. Remember, the United States leadership changing in the Middle East goes back to the 1950s and really starts in the 70s. It's not just the Bushes who did it. It was neoliberals, Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama. They did it too. Yeah. Are you a fan of a channel, Casparian Reports? I haven't watched it yet, so I should. Or Caspian. Why medieval history is so much talked of in media? Because people love thinking about the Crusades and love romanticizing the past. And people are always looking for a golden age because they don't like the age they're living in. And I'm a historian, so many times I don't like the age I'm living in. And there's a lot of really cool and fascinating ways that human beings lived and died in that time period. Yeah, let me see here. Good books beyond C. William of Tyre. I don't know if you're asking for it. Do you think the UK would benefit from a second? I've already answered that several times. Yes. How do you view Gavrilo Princip? Back in 2015, his statue was made in Serbia. I don't think he half expected what would happen to happen. Obviously, I'm not a fan of Leon Czolgosz or John Wilkes Booth or whoever killed Kennedy or whoever killed Gandhi or whoever killed any figure in any part of the world. A massive dictator is obviously a little bit different than an archduke, but yeah, I don't see him as a hero. It's interesting that they do, though. And the nationalist movement was really strong in Serbia and Bosnia in that time. So, yeah, they have gotten along quite well in the past, but not always. The Jews were forced to pay the jizya. The Jews were put into a second-class citizenship. The Jews just didn't have as much of a say and were not as vocally opposed to Islam as the Christians were. Let me see here. Hello, Freshly. Why European history have more media content than U.S. history? There's more areas and countries to pick from. Do you think that what happened in Kiev in 2014 amounted to a coup? I don't know what happened, John. You're going to have to remind me. Can Trump be sentenced to prison after his presidency or not? Yes. He can be sentenced to prison during his presidency. The Russian Orthodox Church is not dying in America. It is dying in Russia. Let me see here. What Western people call the cross is really a statement invented by the Kemetic African and is written in the pyramids as well as at least 5,000 years before Christ. Yes, crucifixion existed before Christianity. The Assyrians were crucifying people 1,000 years before Jesus was born. But I mention this because 2 of the Abrahamic religions recognize each other as legitimate religions, yet both strongly oppose the middle one as an idolatry religion like the Trinity. I wouldn't go that far. Radical Islam certainly sees no legitimacy to Judaism. The Quran certainly has a lot of problems with Jews and Judaism. I mean, the idea of the Jews being rats, vermin, is not a Nazi invention. It comes from Muhammad. The Christians and the Jews kind of have gone, the Christians and the Jews share the same scriptures, the Mohammedans do not. The Christians and the Jews have very similar religious services. They read from, they pray from, their prayers are derived from the Psalms. The Mohammedans do not. There's a lot shared, and I think what's happening is historically, yes, you see more commonality, but more and more nowadays, Christians and Jews have come together, and Islam is kind of the odd one out in many ways. And so, the messianic prophecies, those ideas, yes, that Muslims believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, that separates them from the Jews also. So there's kind of this give and take where one has this, but not this, but this, but not this, but this, but not this. And the Trinity is probably the most unique mark of Christianity compared to the other two. Take back white America and when they are immigrants. People don't understand history. That's why, rando. Who would win in a fist fight, John Quincy Adams or Martha Washington? I love this. We're back to the... I don't think John Quincy Adams would ever punch a woman, so Martha Washington has that. But if you can travel back in time, what era would you travel back into just to see? Ooh. I usually say France in the 19th century to just check out Renoir painting and going to his exhibits. But I want to see how the Protestant Reformation actually gets going in the 1520s in Germany. Do you believe a Trinity was of the earliest strand of Christianity belief or a later addition as a historian? Good question. From what I understand of Christian doctrine and Christian history, church history, Christian doctrines emerge in response to contentions against them. So there's this debate about Jesus's divinity, and it seems to be, from what I can tell of the Gospels and the earliest Christian writers, that they didn't have a for sure cemented idea of what the Trinity was, but that doesn't mean they didn't believe in it. And they definitely believed in the deity of Jesus Christ. So I think it'd be very disingenuous to say they did not. The idea that the Council of Nicaea just threw this in out of nowhere, not true whatsoever. The vast majority of Christian bishops there assented to Jesus being of the same divine substance as God the Father, if you're talking Christianese. That's not true, Harry. You are misunderstanding a criminal conviction and an act of the president. The criminal conviction from the 34 felonies has nothing to do with presidents. That the immunity was given to official acts of the president. It doesn't mean a president can just go shoot someone. It doesn't mean that Bill Clinton can go and stab someone right now. Do you vote Republican or Democrat or Green Party or Libertarian or Independent? Guess away. Yes, let's get to 10,000 by Labor Day. I'd love that. If you were around during the Civil War, would you fight for the Union forces or the Confederates? Also, what do you think about Captain John Brown? I love John Brown. I've been hearing that the Battle Hymn of the Republic is not based on him. So I need to double check that. But obviously John Brown, real aggressive, really strong. I'm not going to say who I would have fought for, because then you might have an idea of where I live. Definitely want to say I'd fight for the Union, because everyone wants to say they would keep Jews safe during the Holocaust, and everybody wants to say they would oppose Stalin or Hitler or Mao, but we have no idea what we would do based on the context. We're only looking at our social circumstances in which we have been raised to believe that these things are evil, and they certainly are evil. But that doesn't mean that in the context raised in that society, we would have the same exact mindset. We are social creatures. We are influenced and socialized in a certain way. So I don't ever like the notion of someone saying, oh yeah, I would have stood up too. No, I don't know if you would have. You might have. I hope you would have. I hope I would have, but I don't know. I'm not perfect. And I don't know what evils I'm standing up for right now just by having the beliefs that I do, that in 100 years will be clearly wrong and I will have looked like a fool. I just don't. Thank you for subscribing, or thank you for sharing all this stuff about Russian history. What's the most wild fact that's known as a conspiracy theory that you believe in? Oswald didn't kill Kennedy, probably be the most obvious one. I'm also susceptible, and Hars will like this, that Nixon was indeed overthrown by the CIA, but I believe Nixon deserved it. The moon landing one I'm learning more about right now, and I'm hearing the contentions to it. I'm not saying I believe in it for a second, but conspiracy theories are interesting and titillating because people like to not believe the narrative. Why do you think about anything, or why do you think about anything, or why do you think? To pass the time. Why? You misspelled why again, Harry. Why would we benefit from a second elected chamber where we have an unelected House and has very limited power that reviews government policies, delays government policy, makes law better, like they blocked Boris Johnson's European Union deal? Thank God. See, that's just your political bias showing. Because the parliamentary system allows the government to grow. The founding fathers were opposed to that, and I think that that has some sense to it, that you just don't want to get massive legislation passed all the time, every single day, and you don't want people just yelling at each other all the time. The founders had a vision for it. They synthesized what the Romans and Greeks had done and took some from the British themselves and created a system that wasn't fully parliamentary and wasn't completely non-parliamentary. Saying that a majority of the founding fathers weren't as Christians and that Woodrow Wilson isn't at least one of the worst presidents in U.S. history makes me think your view is disingenuous. No, Harris, you disagree. Disagreement is not disingenuity or disingenuousness. I'm not being disingenuous. I'm saying my opinion. There are the majority of the founding fathers that we know and love, like the forefront of them, were not affirming confessional Christians. They were definitely influenced by it. They had some affinity for it. They knew the importance of it in their society and to the people of their society, but that doesn't make them necessarily Christians. And if I understand Christianity at all, it's that your belief in Christ is an individual, personal thing, and nobody can definitively say you're a Christian or not. You can self-identify, but that doesn't prove anything. I have eaten samosa. I love it. Do you think hate towards Muslims is due to 9/11 or any other reason? Hate towards Muslims is due to 9/11, due to xenophobia, due to them being different. It's existed long before 9/11. Obviously, the fear of radical Islam, which kills more Muslims than anyone else, is part of that too. I mean, thank God. Look at what Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has done to the country. At least they tried to delay it or block it. Again, you're just letting your politics inform your history. You seem to know half-right things, respectfully. Radical Islam groups do believe in Judaism as a legitimate religion. Otherwise, it's heresy. Jews recognize Muhammad as a Gentile prophet since he is. No. Does God exist? I'd like to think that the world is... I sleep better at night believing in a God. I don't go into my religious beliefs, though. Let me see here. A descendant of Ishmael and God in the OT said he would make Ishmael's descendants a great nation, the covenant. You mean the Old Testament that the Christians believe in and read and follow too? Yes. Jesus on steroids in a fist fight versus Winston Churchill, who would win? Jesus made a whip and threw over a bunch of money tables, so although Jesus being kind of a pacifist, I'm definitely taking Jesus. But if Churchill's drunk, he may not feel any pain and keep going. What is your favorite color and why is it blue? My favorite color is red, but blue is beautiful too. Also pray in similar manner. Yes, they do, and so do Christians. I'm sorry, you're just trying to dissect Christians from that. Those prayer traditions, those habits of following similar religious stories and texts, that comes from Christianity too. All of history is a conspiracy. History is written by the victors. Some of it is, some of it isn't. Do you believe Pizzagate? No. Again, a conspiracy theory. Something interesting, I'm not sure if it's true. Vincent, who is your favorite ruler from the medieval times? Love me some Henry V. Moon landing is as fake as Obama being married to Mike. Oh, geez. Isn't religion a virus? Oh, that's what Marx thought. I don't know, it can be. Religion, from what I can understand as a social scientist, is how cultures understand how they relate to each other and to themselves and what happens to them. It is a way for cultures to grow and develop and for a community to come together. That's all it does. If that leads to religious violence and to a lack of belief in facts, that's a problem with the culture, not the religion necessarily. Let me see here. How much of history is based in biblical times? The ancient world, a huge amount of history. I mean, if you look at if we're to believe that the Bible the Bible is a factual record, you have to say, and that's just what you're asking, then you have prehistoric history in the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve and all that. Then you've got the Exodus, the Egyptians, you have the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks. They're all mentioned in the Old Testament. Then the New Testament is about the Romans. So a huge swathe of ancient Near Eastern, Middle Eastern, and European, Central European and Mediterranean history, Southern European history is based in the biblical texts. I'm not saying that everything that's said in them is history, but I'm saying the context has a lot of history surrounding it. Yes, I live in Seattle and I vote Democrat. You got me. That's why it's always so sunny when I do these live streams, right? Think, Raja, think. Even if a majority of the founding fathers were deists or atheists, they still recognize the central majority. Yes, and a central morality being a Christian, Judeo-Christian lens. I agree. Some progressivism. You are not against, like, saying that we should have pluralism for Nazis. Yes, everybody should be allowed to share their perspectives because the world is better when they are, and if you have a bad idea, let me take it apart and rip it apart with the arms. I'd rather hear it than say, that what you're saying is hate speech. Because guess what? What I'm saying today may be hate speech to someone. That means that I'll be on the chopping block next. It becomes a crucible witch hunt, and everybody loses their freedom of speech. I've read 1984. I've seen how this goes. When I found out that Muhammad married a 9-year-old, I left for religion. So many Muslims don't know their religion. I mean, I will say it's not fully uncommon in that society for young girls to be married, unfortunately. The Virgin Mary was probably 12 or 13. But I'm not going to play the whataboutism. I mean, it's a really damning fact about Islam, and I've talked about it here on the channel before. When is my birthday? Guess. You're downplaying this greatly. Jews, it's the biggest scholars call Islam a monotheistic religion. Some go as far as saying Muhammad is a Gentile prophet, but the vast majority of Judaism rejects Christ. Yes, and a lot of them reject Muhammad too. They certainly reject his testimony, and they certainly reject the actions of his followers. They certainly reject the idea that they are vermin that he perpetuated. They certainly reject many aspects of the Quran. They certainly reject the night travel, and meaning the Dome of the Rock and Alaska is a symbol of colonization. They were conquered by the Muslims. It's after the Christians had conquered them. So it just goes back and forth. Let me see. How do you see the concept of the wall in human civilization? I don't know what you mean. Because he became king as a child, and if you know anything about child monarchs, they are useless. Usually, although Edward III grew into being one of the greatest monarchs in English history, and he was a child when he came to the throne. It's Richard II who you got to watch out for, Harry. I feel better knowing that there aren't all-seeing eyes also. I don't like the idea that he doesn't help people. I feel that, Rando. You and I have talked about this. I get you. What do you think of Dog the Bounty Hunter? I watched him like once or twice, and I used to get him confused with Hulk Hogan, rest in peace, but yeah. Who's your favorite news anchor? Myself. Sorry, Vincent, I'm going to be cheeky on this one. I don't like the news. The media, I make 1-minute videos talking about the news, and I can deliver it to you in a more reasonable, objective way than they can, which tells me they're either stupid, which is not true, they're actually very well educated, or they are purposefully trying to use the news as a subtle but not so subtle way to control what you believe. That's what I think. I don't like the news. I've become a very, very staunchly anti-media. I learn things on social media, and then 20 minutes later, the New York Times is sending me an email telling me, hey, this happened. I'm like, yeah, I know it happened. Why is Trump mostly against our Constitution? Our Constitution? You mean the U.S. one? Okay. I don't know if he is. That's a loaded question. Obviously, you have a lot of questions about the birthright citizenship thing and how you apply that, and it's obviously going against the lettering of the law and looking more at the intent of a law to ban birthright citizenship when anyone born in America, according to that rule, is a citizen. Go check out my Substack, Manu, because I talk about that a lot there. Does the concept of wall, you mean the Trump wall? I'll say this. I heard the Pope say that the migrants are children of God, need to be accepted everywhere they go. The Pope lives in a gated community inside of a city that is an independent country from the city of Rome, which is in the country of Italy. So the idea that I understand why people want to be sympathetic to that, but people build walls all the time and don't even know it. Oh, Fidel, good to see you. It's been a while. What's really in can spam specific part? Oh, geez. Entrails, if I'm correct. What do you think about compartment? Oh, you're talking about, yeah, people build walls in their mind. That's some of the most dangerous. Maybe 11. Nope, Manu. Nice guess. Are you a UFC fan? Not really. Richard II, the son of the Black Prince, how sad it was for Henry IV to have undertaken the sacrilege he did against the fair king. Yeah, but that fair king was terrible at his job. And that was enough back then. I'm trying to see okay, I'm almost caught up to the chat, and then we're going to wrap it up. That's why you have a king and a bunch of lords, and that's why there is a central executive. The king doesn't do anything, Harry. It's so that the executive and the government cannot expand itself. Whenever Parliament can expand the government, Parliament can also shrink the government. So you're saying that you have a king who functions as an executive branch, monitoring the Parliament to make sure it doesn't get out of control. You mean like the United States, with an executive who doesn't have as much power as the king? I don't think it's that you hate the United States, Harry. It's just that you love Britain and anything Britain does, apparently. What do you think the concept of border represents, and tell about human civilization? Human beings do not always have, modern immigration standards did not exist in the ancient world. People migrated in different ways, and the way that they dealt with migration was different. Countries could allow and disallow people and have for all sorts of thousands of years. The struggle of migrants and understanding their plight is not something new. May I ask, how do you do this without a break or at such speed and without caffeine? Do you have? I drink a lot of caffeine beforehand, and I just get excited hearing what people have to say and their questions. And yes, I'm at 94 minutes, so we went way over, but I'm gonna wrap it up in a minute here. But I just love what I'm talking about, and I love interacting with you guys, Raja. So that's why. And I'm definitely a hyperactive person. But after this, I'm just exhausted. I'm just sitting on the couch scrolling, and I'm supposed to go over to Instagram, but we haven't. But we haven't wrapped up here. Yeah. No, not right now, Blue. That sounds kind of boring to me. Should Kamala run again in 2028? I hate Colt because he was a fan of MAGA and Trump. Huh? So what? People loved him because he was a wrestler. He seems like he was a nice person. He definitely had moral shortcomings. No one's saying he didn't. He was also pretty racist, especially early in life. But Hulk, I mean, he's a likable figure. A lot of people really enjoy him. I don't care what someone's politics is when their field is not politics. That doesn't make them an expert. Doesn't make me like them more or less. The vast majority of celebrities in the United States are liberal Democrats. That doesn't mean that conservatives dislike everything about them or don't go see their movies. So, what do you think about alligator Alcatraz? Oh, geez. I'm going to stay away from that. We'll see what happens. No, it's not a concentration camp. Is it humane? Probably not. There. That's a moderate perspective for you guys. Thinks the president should be able to do whatever he wants whenever he wants because he's the president. Yes, he's not the first president or the last president to think that, and there are plenty of English and British monarchs who thought that too and did far more to do that than he has ever done and ever could do. Harry, that's why you have a judiciary, that's why you have checks and balances, that's why you have two chambers of Congress, not one, that can check each other. Which race is, historically speaking, the best looking in your opinion? Whatever mine is. I think that it was kind of even, and then I came in and it just tipped the scales. Good knock to you too, Raja. Okay, we're wrapping up. Why people feel we have to choose between two bad people. People want you. It's all about teams. People just do teams. Who's your favorite founding father? It goes back and forth between Madison for his mind and Washington for his war. There you go. I don't know what. Put your question in one more time, Manor. Oh, did I answer it? Oh, yes, I did. Okay, we're gonna wrap up. Because, well, you shouldn't be allowed to go into some home whenever you want, and the gardens are reserved for the Pope and the Swiss Guard and the staff as a thank you, which is perfectly reasonable. Yes, exactly. And but the Vatican City, Vatican is the home. It's an entire city. It's a country. It is secured. The idea, I'm just saying, it's not just the Pope doesn't look good for saying immigrants are children of God and should be welcomed by everybody, and then he doesn't really follow those principles himself. So there you go. Let me see. What do you think your DNA test most likely is? Estimation. 100% genius, 98% good looking, and 75% right. Very good. And about a 2% on the humility scale. Okay, we're gonna wrap up now. I'm gonna go over to Instagram. If anyone wants to follow me there and ask some more questions, we'll go there till 8 p.m. Eastern. But thank you everybody for joining us. Doesn't Boeing need to be broken up by Congress? No. No, a man without a beard is good looking. No man without a beard is good looking. Well, I've got a little something there. No, just kidding. It's okay. You're entitled to your wrong opinion. How does the United Kingdom's monarch have more power than the U.S. president? He can't do anything. I'm talking about Henry VIII, Edward III, Henry V, William the Conqueror. Even like William III had more power than the president of the United States does. Until really the 19th century, the president of the United States had less power, and the U.S. president really has just doubled his power, tripled his power in the last century. So, and yes, that is called stubble. It's not a beard. I know, I'm cheating. Stubble doesn't count. Okay, fair, whatever. I mean, the guy can declare war and make peace, but he also needs money for which the parliament can decide to give. There was no parliament for centuries. The United States has always had a Congress. There you go. And John, I am here every Friday and Saturday at 6 Eastern and Sundays at 4. Yes. Again, feudal system versus democratic republic, totally different apples and oranges. King has more power than a president. That's it. All right. Yes, that's not how it always has been. And King George had more power than George Washington. All right. I hope you all enjoyed this. We went way over because we had so many great questions from a lot of great people. I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us over on Instagram, friendly_history1. Yes, like and subscribe if you haven't. we will see. We will vote on what we're going to do. One of the topic, my 3 topics, I think, and then you can comment your 4th topic, because YouTube only gives me 4 poll options for my Sunday live stream lecture on Sunday. The 3 topics are Ronald Reagan's presidency, Bolshevism, and I think U.S. immigration, because people have been wanting that for a while. And then we'll see what happens. And yes, I'll read your email. Thank you, Hars. See you guys over on Instagram. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you here tomorrow. And remember, as always, love history. Harry, you're wrong. Bye-bye.